Welcome back. Now, Transparency International, a global coalition against corruption, has ranked Nigeria as the 36th most corrupt country in the world, according to the 2024 Corruption Perception Index, CPI, released on Tuesday. Nigeria shares the position with Uganda, Mexico, Madagascar, Iraq, and Cameroon, each scoring 26 points on the corruption index. Now, this latest ranking marks an improvement for Nigeria, which moved up 5 places from its 2023 position and 10 spots compared to 2022. Despite the slight improvement, though, in the CPI ranking, Nigeria still struggles with corruption, especially in its public sector. Embezzlement of public funds, bribery, electoral malpractice, and weak institutional frameworks that allow corruption to thrive are still problems in the country. And the country is grappling with them, actually. So the Nigerian government has expressed commitments now to tackling the problems, I should say, with policies aimed at improving governance, enhancing public sector efficiency, and promoting transparency. The country's anti-graft agency, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, has secured quite a number of convictions in court against corrupt persons. But it's all still a work in progress. Some experts have said the enforcement of stricter accountability measures, increasing transparency in public procurement, and ensuring judicial independence are critical steps towards reducing corruption levels in Nigeria. Joining me now to discuss more on the subject is the Deputy Director of the Socio-Economic Rights Accountability, SERAP, Kolawole Oluwadare. Mr. Oluwadare, thank you very much for coming on the program. Should we be celebrating this gradual movement? I know it's not a fantastic movement, but then from 2022 to 2025, we can see a gradual movement that we're coming up gradually. At least we're making we're taking some positive steps, right?
Thank you very much for that question. And it would depend on who is looking at it. Who is speaking to that movement in terms of the local context, what is happening on ground, to say whether it is something to be celebrated or not. And that is why it is very important to understand the methodology or the basis of these corruption perception index by Transparency International. There are 10 major metrics that are used in these perception survey. And when you look at it and you identify them with the local issues that we are grappling with in Nigeria, you would perhaps have cause to be a bit skeptical, or not necessarily skeptical. You would see the movement, whether up or down, in the Nigeria context a bit more or differently. So, for instance, one of the things that used would be bribery, a diversion of public funds, ability of government to contain corruption, and the likes. In the past 1 year, what we have witnessed in Nigeria, particularly from the advocacy standpoint of SERAP, does not reflect Nigeria's commitment to fighting corruption. Okay. And there are several examples. I'll give you just a few. The Auditor General of the Federation is an appointee of the President. And in line with the statutory mandate under the Constitution, he or she, the holder of that office, publishes reports annually about funds, which is the result of the audit process across federal ministries, departments, and agencies. And every year without fail, the Auditor General has reported billions of naira, that could simply not be accounted for. And SERAP have taken several steps, including letters to the presidents, to ministries, and even litigations that are still pending in court, to draw the attention of the president to these sad situation, particularly to ensure a recovery of these funds. And that has not been done. How can we say we are fighting corruption? The 2025 budget just passed by way of appropriation at the National Assembly is more than 50 trillion naira. We are going to borrow a significant percentage of those funds to finance the budget. And that is without prejudice to whatever is going to come up as supplementary appropriation. Why are we not looking inwards to ensure that wherever these monies have been stolen from are stopped, and to ensure that we get the recovery of these funds? What about the transparency index in terms of accountability and access to information by the government? how well does the Nigerian government respond to freedom of information requests? How well are Nigerians familiar with the budgetary breakdowns of various arms of government, particularly the executive and that of the legislature? Do we have a breakdown of the National Assembly budget for 2024? We do not have it for 2025. Can we say government is transparent? The various loans that Nigeria has taken between last year and this year, how have they been used? Are there means that allows public access to how these funds have been spent? Where are the contracts? How were the contracts allocated? What procurement process did they follow? What is the status of all these projects? Those are the things that will drive the perception and the reality, I dare say, of Nigerians in terms of whether the Nigerian government is fighting corruption or not. And until the Nigerian people, or perhaps at least a significant percentage or a simple majority, can affirm that on the ground corruption is being fought in some of these ways I've mentioned, then the perception index, whether it's up or down, it not really matter in that instance.
So where do you think Transparency International may be getting it wrong? Because essentially what you're saying now is that, look, the index is not a reflection of what the situation is in the country.
I do not necessarily think it's about Transparency International getting it wrong. And that's why maybe it's a perception index. And the methodology is also public. But whenever we receive this report as Nigerians, and that applies to every other country in the world, there is a need to consider, not reject the report, consider the report within the local context of what we see and what we hear every day. Don't forget, in a country of over 200 million, this index does not mean anything to them than what they experience every day. Power outages, in spite of government so-called investment in the power sector. Access to healthcare, quality one in government hospitals is abysmal. Education, public education is more of an exception than the go-to for the average Nigerian. What about roads? What about security? And all these are in spite of the very heavy allocations of government to these sectors year in, year out. And so the experience of every Nigerian on a day-to-day basis as they go about engaging with these MDAs and the important services they render, of course, frames the perception beside whatever index is produced. So the aim, and I think the aim of these is not to discredit the index, but to view the index within the prism of the local context, the experiences of the day-to-day Nigerians. Another good example that I would mention as part of our own advocacy initiatives, our experience that we've seen. Some years ago, we'd gone to court to compel the Nigerian government to disclose how they spent the billions of dollars they brought in from China to install security infrastructure in the Federal Capital Territory. That loan was signed and obtained by Nigeria from China in 2015. We wrote a freedom of information request to the government who refused to honor it. And we went to court. And 2 years ago, the court gave judgment mandating the federal government to disclose information of how those funds have been spent because the security infrastructure is non-existent. It's not in Abuja. Up till today, government is yet to obey that judgment. The security infrastructure is yet to be installed. How can you say we have made any progress?
Okay, let me ask you this.
It doesn't just.
In what areas do you think the country might be doing well in terms of the fight against corruption? Because it can't all just be doom and gloom.
So and that is why we need to look at governance within this prism. Governance should not be confused with politics. Politics is a process that gets people to power and determines how, when they stay. But governance is what benefits the people. The people do not benefit from politics because not everyone would participate actively in politics apart from voting. Even voting is not everybody that votes. And that is why in looking at the aspects of governance, it is more of movement, action without movement. It looks like we are moving, but we are making no progress. So I am not saying we do not have budgets every year. I'm not saying funds are not being allocated to these sectors through the ministry, department, and agencies, but I'm saying the reality, the experience on ground does not bear out these funds. So perhaps someone else will say government is trying. We've allocated so percentage. There has been an increase in allocated to these sectors. That is fine, say. But what does that mean to the life of the average Nigerian? I know how much I spend, for instance, as just one individual, on fuel to fuel my generators every day. And then when you match that with the amount that government claimed that they've allocated to the power sector, how does my experience bear out the funds that have been allocated? There has been reports about various tertiary health institutions in Nigeria about how moribund they've become, not even offer basic services. It is not that funds are not being allocated to the health sector. Nigeria will obey the law in terms of the bare minimum. A very good example to put a context to these.
But I still have to. Sorry to interject. The reason I asked you that question: what areas do you think the government is doing well in terms of the fight against corruption? I was going to ask you a follow-up. And what do you think also that the government needs to do to improve on the fight against corruption? Because if the government is doing well in certain areas, then there definitely would be certain areas that it is not doing well, that your organization, for instance, SERAP, would want to see some kind of improvement. So, as I said again, it just can't be all doom and gloom. There must be certain areas that the government, you think the government is doing well, and then those areas that you think it is not doing well, what you expect to see.
The only thing perhaps you can say that the Nigerian government does so well will be perhaps the political aspect of governance, which is more of the show. We allocate X, Y, and I'm not giving that example. Government can easily tell you there has been an increased allocation to education. It's a fact, it's true. But how much of that impacts gets to the people? That is another truth that must be compared with the first truth to know whether we are making progress. So the Nigerian government we have made progress in the political aspect of fighting corruption, which is the talk. For in the actual work, the details of the work, we have made no progress. So it is a lot of movement without any progress. I can say that clearly. That is because the actions of the government is rooted in lack of transparency and accountability. The budget for this year has just been passed. It's in excess of 50 trillion. Everybody will clap. It sounds good. The allocations to the ministries, department, and sector sounds good. You will say that is fine. It's just political. What about monitoring what gets to these agencies, how they are used, and how it benefits to the people? That is where the problem starts.
And the good thing is that organizations like yours are supposed to provide that monitoring.
It is transparency and accountability. Make sure that everybody in government, starting from the president, who should set the tone, is accountable to the people, not to the party. He is accountable to the people that he has made promises to, that has voted for him, and to be transparent in the way governance is run. And accountability is simply knowing that there are laws that guide the action of government, and every step and action of government must coincide with those laws.
There's something I'd actually been meaning to ask you, and since you're here now, you know, it's something that I'd actually been meaning to find out from SERAP. Almost every week you file cases in court. You have several cases in court, several of them. Does it bother you at all that, you know, you have these mountain of cases in court and you are not getting speedy, speedy hearing as you would expect? Because I believe by now you must have lost count of the number of cases you have in court.
The basis of those cases, they are essentially public interest litigation. None of them is to SERAP's private interest. It means that we have filed those cases because agencies of government, ministries, department, and even the president himself and governors have refused to do what the law says they should do. Some of them are freedom of information requests, which is basically SERAP exercising its rights as citizens of Nigeria to ask for information, which speaks to transparency. The government does not provide information, and we go to court because the same law that allows us to ask demand for information, Section 20 of the Freedom of Information Act, allows us to go to court to compel the government to act. That becomes another source of public interest litigation. Lately, we went to court to compel the president to issue a to the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs to disclose more than 50 billion naira that the Auditor General said is missing from that department. Do you think that is such a case that we should go to court for if the president has done what the law says he should do and Serap has reminded him to do? Those are some of those cases that we go to court to file. So it is not because we have a penchant for litigation. It is simply because government does not want to do what it ought to do, because there is no political will to do it, and we have to go to court to compel the government to act. Unfortunately, that is our reality.
Kolawole Oluwadare, the Deputy Director, Serap, thank you very much for coming on the show, and thanks for making out time to speak with us.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. I will take a short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us, don't go away. Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal. How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
When you go into public office, you must be ready to answer to the people.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.